On the 2nd of May 2015, the doors of the Lindo wing at St. Mary's Hospital opened, and the world got its first look at the newest member of the House of Windsor. She was wrapped in white, held by her mother, and she had absolutely no idea that several thousand cameras were pointed directly at her from behind a rope line across the street. Prince William stood beside Catherine, looking the way new fathers always look, slightly overwhelmed and trying not to show it. And a few hours earlier, a 3-year-old boy named George had arrived at that same hospital and met his baby sister for the very first time. Days later, Kensington Palace confirmed her name: Charlotte Elizabeth Diana. 3 names, each one carrying a specific weight. Charlotte as a feminine echo of Charles, a nod to her grandfather. Elizabeth after the great-grandmother whose reign was already entering its 7th decade. And Diana, placed there deliberately, quietly, as a tribute that needed no explanation. This was not just a new baby. The 2013 change to succession laws had ensured that Charlotte would hold her place in the line of succession regardless of the sex of any sibling who came after her. For the first time in British royal history, a daughter would not be displaced by a younger brother. She entered the world already representing something different about what the monarchy was willing to become. The first official portraits arrived when Charlotte was 1 year old, and they came with a detail that seemed small at the time, but would define how this family presented itself for years to come. Catherine took them herself. At home, in Norfolk, with natural light and no formal studio setup. The result was something the public hadn't quite seen before from royal baby portraits, images that felt like family photographs rather than official records. That autumn, Charlotte joined her parents and George on the royal tour of Canada, which meant that at the age of 1, she had already appeared on an international stage in front of more cameras than most people encounter in a lifetime. What the world saw was a baby in a yellow cardigan waving from a helicopter, and the internet responded to it the way it responds to very few things, with unanimous, uncomplicated delight. At a playgroup event in Victoria, surrounded by other children and an assortment of toys and bubbles, Charlotte produced her first recorded public word. "Pop." She said it while chasing a bubble across the room, eyes fixed on it with the kind of absolute focus that only very small children and very experienced hunters can sustain. Somehow that single syllable told the world more about her personality than any official portrait had managed. By the time she was 2, Charlotte had settled into the role of middle child with what appeared to be complete comfort. When Prince Louis arrived in April 2018, she was not quite 3 years old, and the photographs of their first meeting showed a little girl who had clearly already decided that having a baby brother was an acceptable development. The big sister instinct, which would become one of the most recognizable things about her in the years ahead, was visible almost immediately. Louis's christening gave the public its first real glimpse of the Charlotte who would keep every royal watcher permanently entertained for years to come. As the family moved past the cameras after the ceremony, Charlotte turned back, looked directly at the photographers with the confidence of someone 3 times her age, and delivered what became one of the most quoted lines any royal child has ever produced in public. "You're not coming." A few weeks earlier, she had provided the summer's most unexpectedly viral royal moment. At the King's Cup Regatta, 4 years old and already showing a gift for timing, Charlotte provided a countdown that the cameras caught perfectly. The moment spread across the internet within hours not because it was spectacular, but because it was so completely, recognizably her, confident, specific, slightly ahead of everyone else in the room. The public was beginning to understand that this was not a child who was going to fade into the background of the family portrait. She was going to be the one you kept finding your eye drawn back to. The year that followed was not the year anyone had planned. Lockdown arrived, and with it a strangeness that settled over the entire world simultaneously. But inside the family home in Norfolk, 5-year-old Charlotte was learning something that the institution she was being raised into had always understood: that difficult moments are not separate from public responsibility. They are precisely when public responsibility matters most. She joined her parents and siblings delivering food parcels to vulnerable families in the area, photographed by Catherine in the way Catherine always photographed her children, which is to say with warmth and without formality. She stood on the doorstep with George and Louis and clapped for healthcare workers, the way millions of families across Britain were doing at the same time. And then there was the video call with David Attenborough. Charlotte, sitting in frame, delivered her opening statement with complete sincerity. "I like spiders. Do you like spiders too?" Attenborough, a man who has encountered virtually every species the natural world has produced, responded with what appeared to be genuine enthusiasm. The clip traveled around the world because it captured something that was becoming increasingly clear about Charlotte. Underneath the composure and the natural poise was a child who was simply, authentically herself. The cameras being present had not yet changed that. The Platinum Jubilee arrived in the summer of 2022, and the balcony at Buckingham Palace held the kind of moment that gets studied afterward. Charlotte was 6, approaching 7, and her resemblance to William at the same age had already been a conversation for months. But resemblance was not the thing that royal watchers were discussing as they watched footage from that balcony. The thing they were discussing was composure. Charlotte stood still in the way that people stand still when they understand what stillness is for. She watched the crowd. She watched the fly past. And she kept an eye on Louis in the specific way that a child keeps an eye on a younger sibling when they have decided that today is not the day for surprises. Calm, watchful, and entirely present. The comparison that kept appearing in the commentary afterward was not to William or to Catherine. It was to Queen Elizabeth herself. A little queen in the making, more than one seasoned royal correspondent wrote, and they were reaching for that comparison not because of the dress or the occasion, but because of something harder to define. The quality of being fully inside a public moment without being consumed by it. That is not something that can be taught in any conventional sense. And Charlotte, at 6 years old, appeared to have it. The Commonwealth Games in Birmingham that summer gave Charlotte her first major sporting event appearance, and she moved through it with an ease that suggested she had been doing this for years. Which, in a meaningful sense, she had. Weeks later came something very different. The funeral of Queen Elizabeth II was one of the most watched events in the history of television, and among the figures walking in procession through the streets of London was a 7-year-old girl in a black coat, her steps measured, her expression still, carrying the weight of the coronation of King Charles III in May 2023 placed Charlotte, now 8, among the junior attendants in Westminster Abbey. Her role was precise and her focus was complete. She had crossed a threshold of some kind, old enough now to be given real responsibility within a state occasion of genuine historic significance, and she carried it the way she was already carrying everything else. With attention, with stillness, and without making it about herself. The big sister moments were accelerating. The quality that had been visible since Louis's christening, the ability to maintain order in her immediate vicinity through a combination of warmth and expectation rather than volume, had become one of the things the public associated most strongly with her. At 9, she attended the Euro 2024 final with William and George, one of the most talked about royal appearances of the year, and the ease she carried into that environment, the confidence that sat somewhere between sweet and sharp, was the kind of thing that royal observers noted carefully because it is rarer than it looks. Charlotte's 10th birthday portrait arrived in April 2025, taken by Catherine in Cumbria. It was a photograph that carried weight beyond its subject because the family had navigated the preceding year through something genuinely difficult, and the image was a quiet statement that they were still standing, still together, still choosing to document these milestones in the way they always had. At the Sandringham Christmas walkabout, Charlotte moved through the crowd with a warmth and naturalness that multiple royal correspondents reached for the same comparison to describe. Diana's specific quality of making people feel seen when she was among them, that quality had a way of appearing in Charlotte's public interactions that was becoming harder to ignore. Easter brought a new hairstyle, and with it a wave of commentary that was really about something larger than hair. The little girl on the Jubilee balcony was growing up. The signs had been there for a while. This was just the moment when the gap between who she had been and who she was becoming became visible. Do you see Diana in her, or Queen Elizabeth, or someone entirely new? And what do you think Charlotte's role in the monarchy will look like in 10 years? Share your thoughts in the comments. See you soon.